Welcome. Better late than never into the library studio of the Yahowah blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We are going to continue with our ongoing story of the last word picture as we have learned thus far that Dowd, who is the Messiah and the Son of God, he is our Savior. He is returning King. He's the person that was copied to create the myth of Jesus. He's the one we should be paying attention to. But as it would transpire, he had a very bad moment in his life. I think it was caused by having spent 48 years in the full brightness of responsibility to convey Yahweh's message to his people, a job that heretofore no one has been able to complete. And he started drinking too much wine, made some terrible mistakes, and God condemned him for it. Not condemning him to hell, not condemning him to death, but accusing him, holding him accountable, and saying that he had disappointed him tremendously. And Dowd, rather than trying to ascertain what he had done wrong, and then simply getting up and doing the right thing again, he doubled down on misery. And the 51st Psalm is testament to that. It is by far the worst of the 155 that we have in the Tanakh. It's horrible. He said unbelievably bad things after doing insanely bad things. Now, fortunately, we know that after I have finished reviewing this, my hope is that over the episodes today, tomorrow, that we complete the 51st so that we can rejoin in the story of Dowd with the 116th Mizmowr, because it is the glorious celebration of the realization that after the intervention by a surrogate mother and father, the Amma and her Baal husband, that Dowd came to his senses. He not only manned up and started to fly right, as they say, but he agreed with the importance of fulfilling the mission. And that's what prepared him to be the Passover lamb, to carry our guilt and his into Sheol on Matzah, to become our Savior. But we're a long way from that point. We're in the darkness of his lashing out at God after God properly assessed his behavior and told Dowd how disappointed he was in him. So as we progress, we have gone through only 3 statements of the 51st. It's only 19 statements long. It's just that each one is problematic. And in the fourth, we find that Dowd is now doubling down on Chata, which means to go away, to become misleading. And he's doing so by using the verbal root. And then Dowd would add a dose of raw, of evil ineptitude into the mix. And while the la ata toward you introductory clause was true enough, the la bad ata and only toward you in what follows was not. Toward you and to you alone, I have Chata, been mistaken, incurring the guilt of having gone astray. Chata ane was I was wrong for missing the way, forfeiting the relationship, and bearing the loss, incurring the resulting punishment of failing to accomplish the goal and failing and falling well short of the desired intent. And this raw, evil, malignant, and malevolent thing, this raw, this wicked, very bad, fiercely harmful, and miserably troubling, distressful act in your sight? From your perspective and understanding, I did. So on that account, you may be justified and correct in speaking these words so emphatically for yourself. You are morally superior and justified, even acquitted in your show of judgment. Mizmowr song, Psalm 51:4. So hard to read these words because they are so distressing. Well, Dowd had destroyed his reputation. He had caused the death of many men. He compromised the integrity of the general defending his people. He forsook his role in the covenant. And he became a failure as a leader of God's people while undermining the credibility of everything he has said and done. And he would have us believe that the only one he failed was God. Well, let's start with adding one more to that list. How about himself? And if we want to be accurate, how about all of Israel then and now? The raw evil and wicked thing that Dowd did was no longer just in the sight of God, because, well, now he has become infamous for it. He had destroyed and buried himself, and he was rotting in his grave, according to Peter and Paul, because, well, they had every reason to assume that to be the case after this terrible ordeal. And then Akiba felt at liberty to replace Dowd with the likes of Bar Kokhba, the son of a star. The Son of God was at this moment, and the immediate future as well, a bomb, a deadly and diabolical libertine. And yet Dowd is inferring that God was being too critical of him, judging him too harshly by an unfair standard. It's like saying, just because you're perfect doesn't give you the right to impose your morality on the rest of us. Huh? You sure you want to talk about that? By stating both verbs and the infinitive, the king is claiming that God was being overly dramatic, too emphatic. This is further underscored by Zakah, which implies that Dowd believed that Yahowah may have been justified on the account of him being morally superior. And no matter the implications, the plain reading of these words overtly state that Dowd was absolving Yahowah of guilt for having judged him. Well, that took some nerve, or at least another vat of wine, perhaps. Oh my. Playing the blame game, he would say, as a concession. In Ewon, the punitive consequences of perversity and corruption, in a distortion of what is right, and by bending and twisting what's proper and true, I suffered the effects of writhing and trembling, in tormenting anguish during birth. And so in Chata, error, wrongly, bearing the blame for going astray, my mother, she conceived me like an animal in heat. That's what it says. I'm not making this stuff up. Psalm 51:5, if you wish to find it, to check it. Pretty astonishing. He's now saying, you're blaming me, but it's not my fault. No, I was born this way. Yeah, as a concession, hen. So what if, since hypothetically and on the contrary, surely when in alone, in the punitive consequences of perversity and corruption, in a distortion of what's right, and by bending and twisting what's proper and true, ba'ewon, wickedly, and in iniquity, wrongfully, and libelously, I suffered the effects of writhing and trembling and tormenting anguish during birth. I was twisted up and distressed, shaken and suffering in labor. Oh my, we're going to blame lusting for another man's woman, lying and taking her, essentially raping her, getting her pregnant, and then trying to convince the man whose woman she was to become gluttonous along with him. And then after he wouldn't play along, sending a note with him saying that I want him set up to die. And then recognizing he was murdered for this. And you want to blame it on childbirth? You want to say that all of this is the fault of you being wrongfully and libelously born in anguish and in tumult because, well, you were twisted up and distressed, shaken, and suffered during labor? You know, it's one thing to say, I don't know my mom. You know, you took me when I was 8, and we don't have a single word from her. We don't know her name. She made no contribution whatsoever to Dowd's life. Okay, so I don't know my mom. That's a tough way to start in this world. But to say, and so in Chata, in error, wrongfully bearing the blame and for going astray, my mother, she conceived me like an animal in heat. Yakam Ani, she was all hot and bothered sexually. Really, you want to go there? Well, he did. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse. Oh, it does. But now at least we know why Dowd grew up to see women. There's nothing more than sexual objects to be conquered. Like an obsessed ram in a rut. Not just in a rut, in rut. This confession, excuse me one second. My dog is biting her nails. This confession is as revealing, quite frankly, as it is deplorable. Its only advantage is that it affirms that I have correctly interpreted these lyrics and that my criticisms are needed and they're appropriate. The hot mess is the Messiah. And if I may quote Nathan when addressing Dowd, you are that man. This inappropriate and derogatory denouncement of the mother he barely knew helps explain why the wayward king was so stunned when he met the Amma, Yahweh's Amma, Leah, a woman who was brighter than she was beautiful, and more beautiful because of her brilliance. He had never met anyone like her, and immediately accepted her as his surrogate mother. But that was still, well, at least a decade from this event. As painfully obvious as it is that Dowd is trying to obfuscate responsibility, he has come to model Yisra'el. Like Dowd, they also blame God for everything. By comparison, you know, my parents were between horrible and useless, as were Leahs. And yet we are better off for having overcome them. Likewise, Dowd should have risen above his and used his independence and success as a springboard towards character development. I did. Leah did. He could have as well. He should have. as well. There is no transmission of impropriety through our genes. The sperm and egg making the life connection do not care if the sex that united them was boring or passionate, loving or hateful. Our soul is neither enhanced nor encumbered by the quality of intercourse or the nature of the relationship that led to its inception. So, while it's true that Dowd was deprived of a loving and supportive father and mother, at least up to the point of our intervention, it is also relevant to note that he had Yahowah and his Ruach to guide him and to protect him. It does not get any better than that. They have served as our mother and father, both for Leah and I. Now, sadly, the 56, I should say, year old king, well, he was trying to blame his stealing of another man's wife and having killed him on anguishing labor, as if he were somehow traumatized and handicapped morally because of it. He is even suggesting that he shouldn't have even been born, as if his entire life were a colossal mistake. Boy, he is wallowing in depression. This makes Dowd irrational at this moment, even immoral. Quite frankly, bordering on insane. Was it the mounting pressure of the job? Or is it now the alcohol speaking? Or simply the consequence of depression? If not for the intervention presented in the last mashal, Proverbs 31, humanity would have died in the midst of this stupor. Had Yahowah not resolved this crisis of character with the chosen Messiah and his son, there is no chance whatsoever that Dowd would have been sufficiently trusted by God to fulfill Chag Matzah. Can you imagine dispatching this brat to do so? He would never have made it out of Sheol. He wouldn't even have known that it was his mission to fulfill. Dowd, of course, continued to bury himself, and considering what followed him as a concession, what if, since hypothetically and contrarily, the last time. Well, I shudder to think how our king will incriminate himself this time. Buckle your seats belts. Hypothetically and contrarily speaking, surely the conformity and reliability, the honesty and truth you seem to want, that you delight in and favor, is in the unknowable core of a person. It's hidden in the recesses, besmeared, overlaid, plastered over. The capacity to understand and the mental aptitude you perceive somehow exists within me. You seem to know of me and have regaled regarding me is all secreted away. It's inaccessible and it's concealed inside of that which is hidden and completely closed off. Mizmowr song, Psalm 51:6. Well, by this time in his life, he's 56 years old. He's heard Yahowah say a lot of wonderful things about him. And he's saying, God, nah, you're wrong. All of this that you speak of, this conformity, this reliability, this sense of integrity and fidelity, morality that you seem to want, that you delight in, that you favor, well, it's unknowable in the core of any person. It's hidden. It's overlaid. It's plastered over. He's saying it's not possible for anyone to live up to God's expectations. And then, pursuant to himself, he says the capacity to understand, the mental aptitude, the chokmah, the intellectual agility, the cerebral prowess, the discernment and wisdom you perceive within me. You seem to think that this exists within me and it's revealed regarding me. Well, it's secreted away. It's inaccessible. It's concealed inside of that which is now hidden and closed off. It's blocked off, sealed up, and shut down. Well, I would say that's thrown in the towel, isn't it? You're saying, God, you're wrong about me. You're wrong about people. You're wrong about me. Now go away. Now, since Hen introduces a hypothetical with potentially conflicting messages, one would be naive to think that Dowd was using the imperative mood any differently. All of the time it's been used up to this point when projecting thoughts on Yahowah. As I have shared, the imperative mood has three potential meanings. It is either an expression of second person volition, which you're saying, this is what you, and he's speaking to God, this is what you want, this is what you have decided upon. It's an imperative, meaning it's an order. You must do the following. You are compelled, you are ordered, you are commanded. And that's not a very good approach when you're speaking to God, particularly in the position Dowd was in at the moment. Or it's presented as hypothetical, as a mere possibility of something that is highly unlikely. And with the doubling up of Hen in two statements in a row, we're certainly have to consider the hypothetical aspect of the imperative mode. And so with the second inclusion of Hen in two consecutive statements, which are otherwise surrounded by the imperative mood, this is Dowd's way of making all of this a confounding mix of hypotheticals, of concessions, of commands, and of projecting one's desires on others. Now, in this case, Dowd is opting out. He is saying that Yahowah is either wrong about him or holding him to an unachievable standard. He is also mocking God, telling him that he's being unrealistic. He has told God that no one can live up to his expectations. Well, it could be the alcohol speaking or the consequence of depression. In his current state of mind, the king doesn't believe that it's even possible for him or anyone else to measure up to Yahowah's expectations. He is saying that even if he had the ability to conform to God's standard, to be as reliable as the Almighty requires, and to be as truthful as is necessary to garner the Almighty's favor, all of that is buried so deeply within him that it is undisclosed. It is unobtainable. It's sealed off. Unreachable, unknowable. Well, this is the Moshe meltdown of Bamidbar, Numbers 11, where he told Yahowah that the job was miserable and impossible. He'd prefer to die rather than endure certain failures surrounded by the malcontents of this day. Dowd did one worse than Moshe. Didn't think that was possible. But he did. There are two startling differences, however, and they're important, and they're not flattering. First, it was the egregious behavior of the Israelites that had frustrated Moshe, who was of exemplary character, while Dowd had brought this on himself. And second, Moshe didn't say that he was inadequate or improperly prepared, but that the job was impossible because of the onerous nature of the Israelites. But here, Dowd is saying that he does not have the mental acuity to perform at the level that God expects. In his fallen state, he isn't near the man that Yahweh claimed him to be. If that man ever existed, according to Dowd, those attributes were now concealed and inaccessible. He had drunk them into oblivion. In this way, Dowd was being very Israeli, unable to admit that he had been dreadfully wrong. He said that God was wrong. Rather than acknowledging that Yahweh had been forthright, honorable, and truthful, he erased Yahweh's name from this Mizmowr and claimed God had been unreasonable. Yahweh's name doesn't appear anywhere in this text. Aggravating this problem, it was Yahweh, who was currently unseen and unavailable. God became so disappointed by Dowd's failures to live up to his calling and to complete the job to which he had been given. He was now speaking through intermediaries, treating Dowd like the rest of Israel. And like every other Jew, Dowd felt so unworthy, he was having a pity party. Now, affirming this conclusion, the king wrote, "You have Chata. You have gone away from me, and you have been continually mistaken regarding me. You have incurred guilt for having been wrong about me. It's you who are lost, forfeiting the relationship with me, bearing the failure, including the resulting punishment of not being able to accomplish the goal with me, falling well short." With Hyssop, I will be cleansed. I'm going to be restored. You're going to launder me. You will wash me. I will become whiter than snow. 51:7. Either confused by wine or disoriented by crippling depression, Dowd was flipping the tables and claiming that the God whose name he was too ashamed to even say is now Chata, mistaken. And from Dowd's sex and alcohol-fused obsession, it's somehow God who Chata has gone astray. In the twisted mentality of the king, God was Chata, guilty of having been wrong about him. That he was auditioning to become the first rabbi. And after inverting reality, the king embarked on some, rather clever quote mining. He would resolve the mess he had made with some Hyssop. But by doing so, he was taunting God. You see, Hyssop, is first used in Leviticus 12:22, and it's used when addressing how Passover would become the door to life. It's the blood of the lamb that is smeared on the entrance to every home by dipping a bunch of hyssop into it. Oh, that had to hurt. I mean, if it's one thing, it monumentally stupid to say, no, God, it's not me who's wrong, it's you who are wrong. You're wrong about me, you're wrong about everything. You're the one who forfeited this relationship. And because you forfeited the relationship, you aren't going to get what you want. And then to say, but with hyssop, you're going to scrub me clean. You're going to be my laundromat using hyssop. He read the Torah. He knows when hyssop is used. It's used to smear the blood of the Passover lamb on the doorway to life. No hyssop, no sign, no extended life. Oh. Boy, this relationship needed resolution. No lamb, no blood, making that less than an ideal solution, but there were other options. For example, in Kara, Leviticus 14, 4 through 6, and 49:52, hyssop is presented as a way of purging the stigma of leprosy, both in a man and in a house. And Dowd would have known all about the attempted subversion of Moshe's credibility as Yahweh's spokesman by his sister, Miriam, embittered, and how that resulted in her being afflicted with leprosy and disowned. So Dowd was rubbing this into. You couldn't even keep the first family together. Therefore, just because he is currently stigmatized, leprous from God's point of view, well, he would avail himself and his household of the prescribed cure. Hyssop. Who needs God? Just grab some hyssop. We know what it's curative for. Now, by mustering hyssop as the resolution to his current dilemma, Dowd was negating his own claim of dunderheadedness, because that was really clever. Sinister, but clever. Now, apart from this citation, hyssop is only used on 9 occasions, 8 of which are in the Torah. I think it's actually 7 of which are in the Torah. And in this regard, a particularly interesting use of hyssop, is found in Bamidbar, Numbers 19:6 and Numbers 19:17 through 19. This is obviously in conjunction with the anima para. Hyssop was added to the blazing fire of the altar in which the productive bull has been placed to purge the returning remnant of Yisra'el on Towrah, 10 days before Dowd's return as king. The other, by the way, use of hyssop is in connection with Ethan Izraki. He's the man that wrote and delivered the 89th Mizmowr. We're going to learn a lot about him before very long. Should you be like me and wonder why Yahowah would advocate hyssop as a remedy for leprosy and then advocate it, associated, I should say it, with purging religious ailments? Well, you might find it interesting to note that hyssop actually offers a range of potential health benefits, supported by both traditional medicinal use and emerging scientific research. Now, these include, let's go through them. Wow, hey, there it is. Skin health. When diluted, hyssop essential oils are successfully used to treat epidermis infections, even acne and puncture wounds, and it is known to restore disfigured and scarred tissues due to its antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties. God was right. 2, it's antimicrobial and antiviral, both. Hyssop exhibits strong antimicrobial, antifungal, and antiviral properties. It is used therapeutically to treat all manner of ailments and is even proved to inhibit herpes viruses and to treat respiratory and urinary tract infections. 3, both immune and circulatory. Hyssop boosts immune function by fighting pathogens and improving circulation. It is a proven remedy for arthritis, for gout, for inadequate blood flow. Number 4, respiratory support. The herb acts as an expectorant, helping to loosen mucus and relieve coughs, colds, bronchitis, and asthma symptoms. It restores airway constriction and relieves allergic reactions. Doing this more effectively than some corticosteroids. Cortisone and steroids don't perform as well. Boy. Dr. Yah. It also serves in the digestive tract. The oils extracted from the hyssop herb stimulate the production of digestive enzymes and bile, improving digestion, reducing gas, bloating, and cramping. It even serves to protect the stomach lining and therefore helps to prevent ulcers. 6, it's anti-inflammatory, and it's an antioxidant. Hyssop is rich in polyphenols and flavonoids, such that the herb combats oxidative stress. It reduces inflammation while lowering the risk of chronic diseases, including cancer. And 7, mental and emotional well-being. Hyssop's calming aroma is used in aromatherapy to reduce stress, to enhance mood, and to promote recovery from anxiety and depression. In addition, the prolific lavender flowers seem symbolic of Shamaim and indicative of the concluding colors of the rainbow as we move into the fall, Moedim. Well, that was quite a lesson. Our king was clearly brighter and better informed than he was letting on. It's also interesting that of the 20 occurrences of shriek, snow, in the Torah and prophets, we find 2 of them in the final mashal and in this related Mizmowr. The first presentation of shriek is in Shemoth, Exodus 4:6, when Moshe's hand was turned leprous as a sign, therefore white as snow. But the most revealing declaration regarding snow is found in Isaiah 1:18, which also combines scarlet and snow in the same manner of the last word picture. Now, scummy as he was at the moment, Dowd was convinced that Yahowah was going to clean him up one way or another. He knew that God had more writing on this than did the king. The whole human experience, the entire creation of the universe, life, his Towrah, his people. And he had an inkling as to how it was all going to play out, even in the midst of his egotistical temper tantrum. Oh, did I hear someone say egotistical temper tantrum? You listen to me. You pay attention to what I'm saying and hear me. Joyful and happy, even delighted and glad. The backbone and body, these bones that you have crushed, that you have pulverized, they now shriek, and they tremble, gill. They will shout and scream during another stage of life. 51:8. Well, there are times when Dowd correctly states that Yahowah listens to him, but this is not one of them. The king is stating that God is celebrating his plight, knowing that he and his people will have to fight for their very survival. Worse, Dowd is blaming Yahowah for crushing him. In actuality, it's the bull hinted at in the previous statement and mentioned at the conclusion of the Mizmowr, who is Daka, crushed, with only one bone left unbroken, which is not the case with the Passover lamb. And while this is all jumbled and twisted, there are some signs of lucidity in the midst of the toxicity. Well, this is wrong, even if partially true. Yahowah didn't want any of this to occur. And the last thing he wanted was to walk away from his son. But under the circumstances imposed by the king, under the auspices of free will, God had no alternative but to distance himself from this mess. You must want to hide. As an imperative, you have chosen to conceal your presence, your very face and appearance, because of my Chata retreat for having gone astray, with me bearing the blame and resulting guilt. So you must choose to wipe away and blot out, as a command, a hypothetical, or of volition. Decide one way or the other to wash off and clean my own, my punitive consequence of my perversions and corruptions for having bent and twisted the truth. Mizmowr, Psalm 51:9. Dowd would eventually come clean, both in the recognition that he had been horribly wrong and also in realizing that it was essential that he come to grips with his purpose and complete the job for which he had been chosen. And by doing so on Matzah, his guilt and ours would be removed. But now, at this moment, God is not obliged to remove his guilt, not his, not ours. In fact, he will not do so without our participation in the process. Dowd was not returning to his senses. He was not yet accepting responsibility to the extent that he could complete his calling. And therefore our guilt would remain, his still remained at this point. So as we have discussed, it's imperative that we understand the imperative. This mood normally serves to express volition in second person, conveying the will and intent of the one being addressed. It can also represent a command, as I have shared. And as the name suggests, creating an imperative where the subject is ordered to comply. There is also a time when it is used to sidestep reality, to convey a mere possibility, whether credible or not, but as a hypothetical. And so in Dowd's current depressed, intoxicated, and rebellious state, all of these must be considered. And in the most favorable interpretation, as an expression of free will, Dowd would be projecting that it was Yahowah's choice, his decision and will, to conceal his presence from the guilt and because of the retreat. Should this be the intent, then Yahowah is being blamed for disappearing, from even from running away from these adverse circumstances rather than trying to resolve them. Then, following along with this approach, Dowd could be saying that it became incumbent on God to wipe all this away. blotting it out, removing the litany of horrid behavior, all to resolve God's dilemma, such that he decided to walk away. However, it isn't possible to blot out the fact that Dowd committed these crimes. Obviously, we know all about them. The stigma remains highly visible, and Yahowah is on record saying that there would be severe and ongoing consequences rather than forgiveness. However, Dowd's troubling assessments, they only get worse when interpreted as if they are commands. The king was in no position to give orders to God, and that leaves us with perceiving them as mere hypotheticals, unrelated to reality, and therefore wishful thinking. And while that's better than wallowing in depression, it's hardly the stuff of legends, is it? Unfortunately, there is no resolving this problem. Unlike his opening statements, where we could redirect the mood by changing Dowd's expression to the cohortative, making this a conveyance of his desire, that does not work with, I want you to conceal your presence, would it? That is, unless he actually wants God to look away and to go away. And that would be worse. Yahowah is deeply vested in humanity. He wants us to live up to his expectations and to demonstrate that we can be perceptive, reflective, responsive, and reliable in our inclinations and disposition, especially in our judgment. But this is only an imperative in the sense that if we fail, we're done. And yet, of course, that is on us, not him. It is true, however, that Yahowah found a way to resolve his son's emotional outburst while reestablishing, I should say, a more appropriate sense of right and wrong for the king. And for that, he would dispatch the most judgmental soul in his arsenal, Yada, the parbull. But even then, the Baal, master of pertinent da'ath, knowledge, would not be deployed as an uncompromising judge of character until the despondent son was walked off the ledge by his surrogate Amma, mother. Now, that said, Yahowah wasn't about to bara start over by conceiving something entirely new from scratch. The existing soul would get his act together instead. But this is what Dowd had to say, and we'll conclude our program with this thought. You must choose to create. It is imperative that you decide to fashion and form that which has never previously existed, clean and pure. Judgment, thoughts, and emotions, inclination, and disposition, all for me, God. Then it is imperative that you decide to repair, restoring and renewing by appointing a firm and establishing a steadfast Ruach spirit within me. Mizmowr, Psalm 51:10. I'm going to summarize this, and we'll return to this passage at the beginning of our next program. But here, Dowd is again projecting on Yahowah and saying that, God, you need to start all over. Bara means to create something which has never existed before. You don't bara to improve that which exists. You bara to start from scratch. The first word is bara, and the opening line of the Torah, and God bara, created. Bara, from nothing. Bara. Well, God, Dowd is saying, you need to start all over again. You need to recreate someone with judgment, with thoughts and inclinations, with disposition. So you need to choose to create clean and pure, tahar, majestic and brilliant thoughts and emotions, inclinations and disposition for me. It's not my job to get my act together. It's not my job to become moral and righteous and correct. It's your job. Fix me. And oh, by the way, that spirit you gave me is broken. I need a new ruach. This one I need to be, like more reliable, more stable. So you need to renew that ruach. It's hard to imagine him getting to the place he would say any of these things. But he did. And that makes the intervention by Leah as the Amma and her Baal as Yada among the most intriguing events in all of human history. And of course, we now know that the final mashal, word picture, the 31st proverb, is what Leah accomplished. I have subsequently learned that the person who was touting her, speaking so brilliantly of her, loving her, who actually wrote those words that we have read, it wasn't Dowd. It was me. And I have also learned exactly what it was that I said to Dowd that got his attention, that resolved this mess that he had made for himself, that he was announcing here in the 51st Psalm, that's going to lead to the majesty of the 116th. You see, I'm the co-author of the song I have loved beyond all others, the 89th Mizmowr. I've learned a lot in the last 2 days, and I look forward to sharing it with you as we progress. Until then, may Yahowah bless and keep you all. Good night.